What do you do if, for example, as a leader, you have fear, you have self sabotage, you have unhealthy behaviors, and you really want to be the best version of yourself as a leader, but you don't know where to start? Well, after investing over $250,000 in my own personal growth because I was honestly destroying myself, and then after making changes, big changes, and changing my life, I then went on to help hundreds of CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs through different levels of income, right? New entrepreneurs to CEOs of companies doing $100 million, where the CEO's got all the money that he needs and he's got these big houses, right? But behind the scenes, he is also destroying his life. And so we want to be conscious leaders, right? We have something inside of us. And if you're watching this video, then chances are you want to make some changes. So I'm going to be going through 10 different areas. And some of these are going to be based on some of my top articles from entrepreneur.com. I write on personal development, on things like meditation, on things like conscious leadership. And I'm going to be really condensing a lot of that in this video for you. So my journey started back in England. I'm based now in San Diego, actually Coronado, which is kind of within the San Diego area. And back in England, I was an overweight rather bullied teenager. And because of that bullying, to cut a long story short, I really self-medicated. And so I got into this addiction pattern. And this addiction pattern, I was a personal trainer and also a DJ. This addiction pattern was basically drink and then smoke and then gamble and then take drugs and then in the morning have a lot of porn, right? And it was this cycle. And I didn't learn until later on that the opposite of addiction is connection. And I really needed to actually start to heal myself. And so I was destroying the relationships around me. I was really destroying myself. And that impacted my thinking. It also impacted my productivity and impacted the way that I was showing up. I wasn't the best version of myself. And so the big change for me, which is actually number one, was when I changed my environment. So I was living in an area in the UK called Exeter. And in that area, I was a DJ and I was a personal trainer. And so I had all of the people around me kind of triggering me to take those negative, unhealthy behaviors. And so one day I had a phone call from a friend called Tom, and he said, Simon, I got a spare room. And this was my window of opportunity to change my environment because I realized, and I had the self awareness at the time to realize, I've got these big goals, I've got these things that I want to do, but if I'm not strong enough, right? I'm not strong enough right now to say no to these things. But I knew that if I made a change in my environment, that I would create some space for myself to get better, right? To start to work on myself and start to heal because I had big dreams. I wanted to move to the States. I wanted to make $1 million. I wanted to, create a really great life for myself. But at the time, I had an environment, I had people around me pulling me, but it was my own choices, right? But essentially triggering me within this sequence every weekend to take these unhealthy behaviors. Now, I don't know where you are and what your unhealthy behaviors are, but just know that the steps I'm going to be sharing with you are really going to help to catapult you to the next level. So, the first and number one on this list of 10 is environmental changes. Now, this for me was a very big change because it was about me moving out of the area that I grew up into a different area. But whether that's, you know, setting boundaries with certain people that, aren't good for you, right? Environment change can mean any number of things. But what it does is it basically gives you space to start to get clearer to develop better and stronger habits. Okay. So if you're not in the right environment, it's not conducive to you being able to implement those changes because of a lot of the time, our false self, our ego, is not strong enough to deal with the temptations that are around us. All right. So, number one, environment. Number two, and this is absolutely huge, when I looked at everything that I'd invested in when it came to personal growth, right? All the retreats, all the events, everything. I realized that what created the biggest catalyst of change for me to actually heal myself was connection with myself. The opposite of addiction being connection. And for me, I had these really unhealthy addictions. And so I had to go inward. And what that really means is actually connecting with myself so that I can feel the feelings that I was suppressing and blocking away. So imagine if you're smoking, if you're drinking, if you've got these unhealthy addictions, essentially you're trying to get connection in a different way versus actually really start to feel and heal yourself through things that have happened in the past that have hurt. So, for example, in my case, I was bullied by men. And so every time I went out, even into the street and walking my dog, I wouldn't get eye contact with guys. I wouldn't interact because to me, that was a threat. And so what we have to recognize is that these events that have happened in our past, there's this timeline of events. What what can happen is that that impacts how we show up now as a leader. And so when I'm coaching people, for example, and they're in pain, I ask them, okay, the triggers that you have, how old are you? Not how old are you now, but how old were you when that trigger first happened? And oftentimes, what we start to realize is that when we're not showing up as the best version of ourselves, it's not who we are now, but it's this 7 year old or this 10-year old where we were bullied or there was some kind of abuse or a parent left or some kind of event, something happened to shape and change us into the destructive person that we are. So when we close our eyes and when we go inward, not just for 5 minutes, but 10, or 10 minutes, but we go deeper and deeper and deeper, what starts to happen is we start to basically go into the well and start to bring out all of the sludge. And Ed Sheeran has a great quote, and he says, in order to get my hit songs out, I had to get my shit songs out. And so he had to go through a process basically of writing really terrible songs to get to writing great songs. And so if you think about that in terms of your own personal growth and your own personal development, by going inward, right, we can start to clear things out that are energetically holding us back. One thing that I came to a massive realization to actually an event with Tony Robbins. I had invested in Tony Robbins' platinum program. We'd gone to India, and there's a guy there called Donny Epstein, and he's basically Tony's energy worker. And it was in a hotel room with Donny where I was on a table and I'd gone inward and we were doing this work. And I suddenly realized that I had so much within me that just needed to be released. And I started to change. But I was only able to do that by understanding what was happening within me. Okay. So going inward is essentially shutting out the external world, going within, becoming present, and sitting with, I'll be honest, the pain, right? And then starting to recall things and then have awareness and then starting to forgive. But we need to spend more and more time on that inward journey. And so for me, it wasn't just about meditation and using meditation as a means to come back from feeling stressed. So, for example, I'm stressed out, so I'll meditate. But really learning and identifying that I'm using meditation as a healing mechanism by constantly going inward and constantly going inward and then just clearing out and clearing out. And the more times that I would sit and the more consistent times that I would sit in my meditations, then I would start to get these big insights. I would start to access my intuition. I started to raise my level of consciousness so that my thinking was different. And the impact then on my business was, for example, in sales calls, I was able to be more present. I wasn't needing a script as much, right? In my marketing, I was able to be more authentic. And it shifted me as an entrepreneur. But if we've not started that journey yet, we don't know the benefits. And so for an entrepreneur, what we think is we think, oh, I don't have the time for that. No, you need to make the time for that because you're going to be clear. Because the biggest challenges for a lot of entrepreneurs is we're erratic, we're compulsive, and we have these unhealthy behaviors because there's so much ego drive to beat people and to compete with people. And so we're not a conscious leader. And most likely, if we're watching this video, because the title is really about being the best version of yourself, to me, as I've done this work and actually done the work, and there's watching videos, right? And there's education, and that inspires us. But the real work, getting into the weeds, is for example, the sitting. It's the being with yourselves. That's the work. And unfortunately, if we just watch videos and we watch content, but we don't do the work because we don't use that inspiration to actually sit and do the work, we go into this repetitive cycle, we get into these loops, and we don't actually feel like we're moving forward. So part of personal growth, part of being a best version of yourself is not just, well, I read a new book or I watched, 20 videos this week. Did you action? Did you do the work? And so that's why I want to give you actual actionable things within these videos. So number one from the environment is, do you need to make an environmental change? If so, what is that? Number two, going inward would be starting a meditation practice. If you check out a link in the description to the Super High Performance community, I've put together a meditation experience with you for you in that, and also a sequence of 7 days of meditations, and these are all free, where you can start your journey, and it's specific to entrepreneurship and leadership. So we got environment, number one, number two, going inward, and number three is understanding our patterns. Now, here's the interesting thing about meditation and also changing your environment, which is you start to understand that by changing those things, you start to recognize that when you change a new pattern, you start to create a compounding effect on other areas of your life. Right. For example, improving your nutrition or starting a meditation routine or going to the gym. Or for me, pickleball changed my life. I had a medical condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which basically my immune system attacked my nerves. I couldn't walk. And for 2 years, I was in this really dark place. And so for me, this one decision where I walked past and I'd heard about pickleball, but I'd not gone in, it changed my life because it got me out of isolation. It got me connecting with people again. And so my pattern was being a victim, as an example. But my new pattern was, okay, I'm going to go and start to play this. And then you get the positive rewards by playing it and meeting people. And then it starts to lift you up. And then you're into a new pattern and behavior. So, in one of my articles for entrepreneur.com, it's called The Navy SEALs of Personal Growth. I talk about the importance of basically repetition, neuroplasticity, repeated things over time consistently build up to create new beliefs and also to shift your identity. So if you want to be a better version of yourself, it's very important to understand this sequence to change in your identity. So for example, I don't drink now. I don't identify as a drinker, right? So how did I change that? I had to change my identity. So I had to make a decision. I had to then do something repeatedly. And then you're not in this push pull of, I want to give up drinking, but I still am drinking. And so there becomes a point, which I want you to really understand it is going to happen. Using alcohol as an example, you will reach a point where you identify as being a non drinker if you do things repeatedly. And this is part of the challenge that a lot of people have, which is they start something, but they don't follow through. There's a lack of integrity with self. And so you need to understand that these streaks are very, very important. The psychological impact of repeating something over time, again and again and again, you've got to get those streaks in. So if you start to recognize that, for example, you break your cycle and then you suddenly start eating ice cream. Well, if you do that again twice, you're just stacking up more and more against you to be able to break that. So if you then, because with sugar, you're going to want more. The more that you have it, the more that you want it. So if you have ice cream once, you're going to want it again. And then if you do it again, you're building up that repetition. So it's such a massive shift to flip that and recognize, okay, if I start a meditation practice and I do it consistently, I'm going to feel better more consistently. All right. So that's about understanding how patterns impact and change your life. So the next one is hope of a new future. This was very important for me, especially in, when I was going through in the darkest part of my addiction in my 30s. I had to get clear about what I wanted. And so I had to take basically, and there's these quotes around turning a dream into a decision. So maybe you're watching this and you're like, I've got things, maybe on your to do list, or you got these things which are like, oh, maybe one day. My advice for you, my actionable advice, is to look at all of those things and actually make a decision about the ones that you're going to follow through on. And if you've got a bunch of ones on there that you're not really serious about, then shelve them, because hope of a new future is about you saying, okay, this thing, new business or new relationship or whatever it is you desire. It's about, instead of it being a dream, it's like I'm deciding. And then in the decision, that causes you to take the first step on the milestone and the sequence that you're going to move through. So I would have not changed my life if I didn't go to the States, be shown around the States by my friend AJ, and actually be and say to myself, I'm moving here. A decision creates energy for action. And actually, it is a bit sad, but my friend's AJ's uh, dog died recently. And I remember years ago, uh, I had this belief around dogs. And then I was around, my environment changed because I spent a lot of time with my friend AJ. And then I was around his dogs that were so loving and kind. And I had always said to myself, I'm not going to have a dog because I don't want to pick up poop and stuff like that. And then I was around these dogs who were loving and kind, and it changed my perspective on dogs. And then I ended up having my own dog. Actually, when Tony Robbins at an event told me to get one, so now I have a King Charles Cavalier if you're a dog owner. So can you see how all of these are kind of, you know, intertwined with one another? So if you are watching this, maybe you've lost hope. Maybe, I'm 45 years old. I don't know how old you are, but maybe you're watching this and certain things have happened in your life and you've lost hope because you don't feel like it's achievable anymore. Well, you need to start to change your belief around that. And the way to do that is to start to stack up evidence by, for example, learning about other people's stories and motivations. There's testimonials on this channel, for example. That's the reason, actually, why watching testimonials and other people's stories are so important, because it gives you hope that you can actually be the best version of yourself and achieve some of the things that now are possible because other people have done them. Number 5, and this is absolutely critical, which is the honest truth. If I'm taking, in Conscious Impact, for example, which is in the Super High Performance community, link in the description, there's a series of about 42 questions in that process. And the outcome of that process is clarity. But if someone doesn't honestly answer those questions, and if there's a question, they're kind of like, oh, I'm just going to avoid that. The reality is, truth creates transformation, and dishonesty basically keeps you stuck. It keeps you in self sabotage. And so, why don't we like to be honest? We don't like to be honest because we fear something. If I'm honest with my partner, then I'm going to lose them. If I'm honest in this situation, the employee is going to leave. Versus understanding that if we're in truth, then people can align to our truth. And then also there's a lot of trust built within that truth. But maybe in the past, we've experienced, maybe in our childhood or situations, where now we're not acting and showing up in that way. Maybe we had a dishonest parent. Maybe we've had an experience in our past, when we're younger, to cause us to lie and just be avoidant. So when you start to be in your truth and be vulnerable and be honest, there's a power in that. I can remember an article that I did many, many years ago, and I was coming out of my addiction to cocaine, and I had fear about putting this article out. The title being "How to Kick a Filthy Cocaine Habit," essentially. And I feared that I would lose clients if I shared this story, but it didn't happen. And actually, it attracted people to me because of the truth of my story. And so, honesty and truth through every stage of what we're doing is very, very important. And when you start to get that out and to express that, it's not just cathartic, but it also brings you clarity, which produces a lot of energy for you to create action. And I'm all about super high performance. And so this is a key element. If you want to go through that process, it's completely free. Link in the description to the super high performance community. That's quest one, conscious impact. The next one, coming on from that, is clarity. Why is clarity so important? Clarity is important because it brings us self awareness. And if you want to be a better version of yourself, self awareness is absolutely key because self awareness gives us a choice, a new choice. If we're not aware of something, we can't implement a potentially a healthy choice. But for example, when you get asked a series of deep questions that you've not asked yourself before, suddenly you go, oh, I didn't think about it like that. I didn't realize that. And from that realization, you get to go, now I can make a healthier choice for myself. And that series of habits and repetitive behavior is going to change your life. It's going to change your outcome. So that there's that one. Uh, Also, with clarity, a lot of people struggle with asking for help. And so by starting to be willing to ask for help and be willing to be vulnerable, you're going to get clarity, because one of the best ways to get clarity is through questions, right? When I'm in a conversation with someone and they're telling me about their truth, about what's been going on in their lives, um, I'm going to ask these deep questions because it gets people to go inward and it gets them to start to see something from a different perspective. Oh, I didn't realize that, as I mentioned before. The next one, number 7, which is beliefs. If you're in a state right now, if you're in a place in your life right now where you don't feel like you're showing up as a conscious leader, if you're wanting to improve, you have to understand that it's your beliefs that drive your behavior and drive your outcomes. And so you have to look deeply at what you believe about yourself and what you need to believe to get to where you want to be. In my super high performance formula, which is quest 3, I have this process called the belief shift. And so maybe right now you don't believe that something possible. Uh, Maybe you have a belief around money that's not supporting you. Maybe you have a belief around relationships that's not supporting you. Here's what I want you to understand: when we start to put the legs under the table, right, start to find evidence, what that starts to do is it starts to change our beliefs. And also, repeated thoughts create a new belief system, which then shifts identity. Now, what impacts thought patterns is energy. So, for example, when you meditate and you feel and you're in a different vibration, you're in different energy. So, for example, I'm stressed out, and then I meditate, and then my vibration goes up, right? My thinking is going to change, right? So, I'm going to go from in fear to optimistic. And so, from that optimism and from that different way of thinking, if I continue to repeat that thinking, that belief is going to start to install within me, uh, versus an unhealthy belief that's not supporting me. So, as an exercise right now, I want you to just write down 3 beliefs that aren't supporting you on the left side of a piece of paper. And on the right side of a piece of paper, write down what your belief needs to be to get you to where you want to be. So that takes us stopping for a moment. And actually, meditation is great to do this. And if you actually want to be guided through this, you'll actually get that in Quest 2, which is free. It's called All Fired Up. And I'll take you through meditations. Then you're basically, what's going to happen is your vibration, your energy is going to change. You're going to start to think differently. And then you're going to act differently. A lot of people see great results just from that 7-day process because they're taking different actions and they're starting to change their belief patterns. Next one, number 8, which is consistency. Earlier, I spoke to you about the importance of streaks, right? Well, in business, in leadership, being consistent isn't just about driving sales and being consistent with your marketing. It's also you showing up in a kind, conscious way with the people around you. So that can be for example, in your personal relationships. So think about the areas that you want to be more consistent in. Because it's not always about goals, right? It's like, actually, I just want to be kinder more consistent. And so for a lot of people, they want to improve their time management, which actually comes from also being consistent, right? Um, but they don't realize and they don't understand that time management comes from self management. Consistency comes from self management. So I hope that you're getting from this video that the more that you work on yourself, the more that you develop yourself, the more that you're going to be consistent, the more that you're going to manage your time effectively. Think about someone that's scatterbrain, all right, that's all over the place. Do they get things done? Do they perform at a high level? No, because they're all over the place. But if you're in a high energy, if you've meditated, right, and you've been doing that consistently, what's going to happen is you're going to come out of that meditation and you're going to knock 5 things off of your to-do list where that has just been something that you've procrastinated on. All right. So consistency comes from you working on yourself and increasing your energy. And of course, the benefit of that consistency is that you also build trust. Because one thing that people hate is for someone to say that they're going to do something and not follow through. I can guarantee if you're in a relationship, that's something that may have come up with your partner. If not now, then definitely previous relationships. You're just not consistent. You don't do what you say that you're going to do. The next one, which is energy. Now, I love this topic. In fact, I wrote an article for entrepreneur.com talking about energetic intelligence. And so we've got emotional intelligence, understanding our emotions and how that drives our behavior. But then we also, as we go inward and connect with ourselves, we also need to understand our energy, right? We need to recognize that if we, for example, as an entrepreneur, are being lonely, that's in direct relation to our energy, and we just want to avoid people. Versus if we shift our energy, we're more open, we're nicer on the street to people, we're engaging in conversation. I definitely notice that in myself. When I'm in low energy, I don't want to be around people, I'm more introverted. But when I shift my energy, when I for example, play pickleball, or when I meditate, when I have a cold shower, when I reset myself on my acupuncture mat, I'm always trying to shift my energy to be it the best it can be, because I know that that impacts people positively. And if you want to be the best version of yourself, understand there's a direct relation and direct link between your energy and you feeling at your best versus and then being your best, right? So have your best energy, feel your best, and then be your best. The final one, which is number 10, which is habits. Right now, get honest, right? Number 4, get honest about yourself, to yourself rather, about the habits that aren't supporting you and just one habit that you want to change. Now, for example, if that's meditation, that's a great one to start because there'll be a massive compound effect, right, on that. And I've given you the resources to start to do that. But it's not just about a habit, it's about recognizing that to get to that habit, you need to create a number of streaks. And there's different research and videos that you'll see saying it takes 21 days or 90 days. Don't worry about that now. Start and be consistent and put it on your calendar, schedule it. If it's on your calendar, it's your commitment calendar. I can see from an entrepreneur, from a founder's calendar, essentially what their self care is going to be like, what their life is like, based upon what they're actually doing. And so, for me, recently I started a new nutrition habit, and I'll explain why. With the Guillain-Barré syndrome, basically impacts inflammation. And so I had to start a new habit of eating fermented foods, changing my diet to eat, 30 different vegetables a week. And that was easy for me to start. And now, by doing it consistently, I've built it into a habit where I'm not having as much sugar. But in recognizing that you need to get streaks, I knew I needed to go back to back, right, for a certain number of days, which is why for a lot of people, they actually need accountability. And that's one thing, by the way, if you go into the Super High Performance community, if you go in there, you have to do it within a certain amount of days or you're asked to leave because it creates a consequence. So for some people, and you may be watching this going like, I can start a habit and follow through. But for some people, they need the accountability so it develops into a habit that sticks. And when I put people through the Super High Performance Formula, which is a 6 week intensive, what they start to understand, especially as an entrepreneur and a founder, is the direct link between their own personal consistency and how that impacts business success. So if you're being inconsistent in your personal life with your, for example, your nutrition, with your fitness, with your sleep in particular, all of these things impact energy in your nutrition, which is all tracked in Super High Performance. Then when you do that every single day for 7 days and then for 14 days, up to 6 weeks, what starts to happen is you feel so good because you've got these new habits in place, but you start to go, oh my God, now I get why my business isn't where it needs to be, because it's my own behaviors that are directly impacting the business. So post into the comments, out of these 10, which has been the biggest insight for you and which are you going to take action on first? And also let me know in the comments if there's any of these that you want me to dive into in a bit more detail. Hopefully, I'll see you in a future video. If you're not already subscribed, hit that button. And here is to you being the best version of yourself, which I know can start today. It doesn't have to start tomorrow. It doesn't have to start in a week. You can start changing and being the best version of yourself the second that you leave this video. I'll see you soon. Bye.